Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the conversation today with Megan Drayton, a marvelous, courageous, charisma teacher, a teacher full of charisma in Columbia, South Carolina. And we're going to be talking today about teaching with integrity and heart in difficult times. And we know you know what we're talking about because it's a hard time for everybody. I want to tell you a little bit about Megan and how we met and how we became friends and colleagues. She has been an elementary school teacher for most of the grades now for 14 years, working in high poverty schools. She's on a mission, as we all are, for social justice and doing right by all kids. She's working in a Title I school. And she's committed to using literacy as a tool to empower and transform lives. And you'll hear the story of one of the lives that she's transformed, but there have been many. The way we met was that she was the last winner of an award that I sponsored, a literacy award for teachers through IRA, now International Literacy Association. And I was so taken with what she had done. It was a $2,500 grant, and she used it to buy books and expand marvelous book talk work that she had going on in her classroom. We both are fans of Heidi Mills, Dr. Heidi Mills, and so that was another way that kind of pushed us together. And Heidi, hope you're listening, and we wish you well. And it's been when I found out as we began, because as you said, we're both before we started, we're both big talkers, and we started talking to each other and emailing, and got to, you could say, fall in love with each other as people and as colleagues. So I wanted you, people that know me, to meet Megan because she's a force and you're going to be hearing about her. So welcome, Megan. Anything you want to add? Anything you want to say before we get
Well, that's quite the introduction. Thank you, Regie. And I will say we met at the time when it was pretty pivotal and I was going through some really hard times, and just to be reminded that our individual stories do matter, and learning about your story and you helping me find my voice and pushing me to use what I know that's best about teaching and myself as a practitioner and my beliefs, and just to dig into that hard work. And I definitely think that's where Heart Center Teacher definitely came in. I remember talking to you and I was on vacation and I couldn't put it down because it was the cup filler that I needed in the moment to be like, yes, this is my why. Like I remember I was writing all over it and I was like, yes, this is my why. And so just those pieces, having those colleagues who remind you who you are and to keep going when the times are hard, because our work does matter, even in some of the really hard moments, especially in the hard moments.
Yes, and it requires a lot of courage and professional knowledge, and that's something that you have in spades. Let's start by talking about your teaching practice and how being part of a professional learning community and being a learner yourself influences the way you interact with students.
Yes, and so you mentioned Dr. Heidi Mills and how we just love her, but I met her in my second year, and she talked about believing people into being. She saw the potential in me and helped to build that capacity. And one of the things that she taught me was to identify my beliefs, and then to live into those beliefs. And so, of course, they have evolved over time, but my core is that every child deserves to learn something new every day. Every child already has a voice, and it's up to us to be able to empower them to use that voice, to help them have that agency to know that their learning isn't for the sake of school, it's for the sake of their lives, and to do something meaningful with it. That choice is such an important factor, but we have to scaffold them into that choice in meaningful ways. That relationships are such an important cornerstone to working with kids and having that respectful culture with them. And I remember reading in your book, you talked about the intellectual being in our students and recognizing that everybody is an intellectual and to honor what they bring to the table. And I feel like that's such an important piece of the belief system that I have. That literacy isn't just we're learning to read and write, but we're using them for tools in the world and to operate and to understand the world, but also to shape the world, because language does direct and reflect what we think. And so it's so important for us to have those tools to shape the language in ways that are meaningful for us, and then to communicate it with others.
Yeah, that's so well said. And especially now, we have tough times right before a presidential election. And I worry about all the people that have not been educated as critical thinkers and can't
Yes.
recognize, the lies from the truth, and we're paying a big price for that. So being an
Absolutely.
advocate for kids and making sure that the work we're doing is not just, skills and strategies, just it has to be about critical thinking and
Yes.
um, what I call curriculum as conversation, that
Hmm.
whatever we're teaching, that we're getting kids to think on a deeper level and give it agency in their lives. And I know you believe this, we both, it's not about what's best for teachers, it's about
Hmm.
what's best for kids. And I want you to tell the story of, I think when I realized what a gifted teacher you were was when you told me about Catrice. So you have, as I think all good teachers have this capacity that the kids that you serve, not all of them, but some of them remember you for a lifetime. And you have a number of students
Hmm.
that have come back to you more than a decade later
Yes.
and want to tell you about their lives. And that is such a gift that impacted, you have impacted them in such a way. So talk about Catrice, because I was very, as our listeners will be too, very impressed with that story and the impact that you not only had on her life as a teacher more than 10 years ago, right?
Mhm. Yes.
And that you're still in contact with her now.
Yes.
So tell that story because I think it's very, very important.
So Catrice was a student in my first year of teaching, fresh out of college, rose-colored glasses. Everything's going to be perfect. I'm going to save the world. And my class was really, really challenging. I was not prepared, and Catrice could sense it all over me. And she's a powerhouse. She could command that room, and she did. She small instances like walking in the hallway and making noise and tapping and dancing and all the things. And I remember it was one day in particular, we were in the hallway, and I was doing all the teacher things. I had done all the teach tos, and I looked at everybody and I said, okay, we are in the hallway. Remember, we're being respectful so others can learn. And Catrice just got herself out of line and just made the loudest noise. And I looked at her and I reminded her, we will follow classroom expectations because we are respectful of each other and the learning. And in my soul, I was like, this is going to backfire on me. She is going to run down this hall. She's going to sing and dance. She's going to do all the things. She actually got back in line. And it's like saying it feels small, but with people who have been with kids who are defiant in every part of their being, when they take that moment to realize you are consistent and your expectations are consistent and that you expect the best out of them, that moment that they buy in, it shifts the entire relationship between you. And so she and I, after that day, after she gave it, I was like, oh my gosh, she made a choice. She chose to work with me. She fully engaged in everything that we did. She started writing letters to me about the hard things she was going through, about, just some family situations and her father passing. She wrote to me consistently, and I wrote back to her. She talked to me in social studies about where she fit in the curriculum and being biracial and just how she connected to what we were learning. She got other learners to settle down because really she wasn't defiant. Like that's a term that we use to exclude children in the learning, right? She wasn't defiant. She was strong-willed. She was a leader. And it was just, was I giving her what she needed to live into the disposition of a leader? And she changed me as a teacher. I remember I had so many assumptions about what a learner was supposed to look like, and she shifted that for me. Like, she was the model learner. She was the kid that once you give them a reason to learn, they do learn. And today, Catrice is my friend, and I got to go see her perform on a live tour. She's phenomenal, but she is just as phenomenal as she was when she was 10. Like, all she did was become more amazing over time. And so that's the gift in it, right? Like, if you can honor who people are, and if you can meet them what they are, and if you can construct that curriculum with them in ways that matter, you get to see the real them. And those relationships are lifelong.
It's an amazing story, and congratulations on what you were able to accomplish. What you did for her, though, is you saw her. I write a lot about that in the Heart Center Teacher. You saw that even though she was this disruptive person, you saw something in her and you
Mhm.
brought it out. And I think that that whole relationship thing that you talked about is so critical. That's our job. We have to be able to see our kids and make sure that we know what their interests are. We can discover what their true creative abilities are, that we see them all as smart. So, and she's not the only, you've told me a number of stories.
No. And even
She's not
last
the only
year,
Patrice.
yeah, even last year, so that I'm at a new school, my students from my old school, because I wasn't there to see them when they did their senior walk, they came and saw me. And I just poured down tears, but it really just, it validates the hard work we put in with kids, even when they aren't easy, right? Because we're people. It matters. And the language that we use with them matters, and the ways that we lift them up and how we lift them up and the things that we expose them to, especially with literacy, it matters. And that's what they hold on to.
And I know you care about them.
Yes,
You,
deeply.
and we'll talk about this, but the community that you created in your classroom, like talk a little bit about the book clubs. Because
Yes.
that was one of the things that most impressed me about you being the award winner and how you used that grant. Because and then you sent, I didn't have I didn't have any say in who the winner was, but I was so impressed by what you had done. And you sent me I think it was a DVD
Yes.
to see what it looked like when your kids were working together in book clubs. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so as we know, books are transformative, but when kids can see themselves in them, but not only see themselves, but see what they can do to change lives. And so the whole cornerstone was social justice. Like, what can we do with this new knowledge to change the world in small and large ways? And so the kids got to have choice in all the books I was able to buy from the grant, and they chose pieces that mattered to them. They read them, they engaged in them, they annotated. They did all the work as literate people, but then it was the so what, now what? What do we do with this knowledge? And how do we change people who didn't get to engage in these texts? And so they did social action pieces. And I remember we sent some of those to you. Some kids actually wrote poems based on what they took away from their books, and they wanted other people to be moved in ways. They're like, they can't sit and read this whole book, but they can get pieces of it that matter to us. So they focused on themes and they made poems. They did social action posters that they put around the school. Some of them just realized that kindness was the biggest tool to take away, like being people who are kind to people from what they read. Some people actually made presentations, and they went around to other classrooms and they wanted to share quotes and talk about how those quotes impacted them and then how they hope to inspire others. So it was just such a meaningful way to take that literacy piece and think about, why do these things matter for us as people, and how do we use it to change us and to change others, so that we are change agents in positive, meaningful ways.
And you gave them the agency in their lives that they hadn't had from perhaps in their families and in other classrooms, because you didn't tell them exactly what you wanted them to do. You gave them
Right.
a lot of choice in how they presented what they knew and what they were thinking about. And that's huge. And for some kids, it is in their classroom and the teacher that is the first place, the first sanctuary where they can feel free to express themselves in whatever mode feels most comfortable to them, whether it's showing what you know through a rap or a song or a poem. It doesn't have to be like a book report, which is pretty boring,
Right.
right?
And I think that was the gift of working with Catrice and that group that I had in that first year, is they just kind of took me down to a shell and I got to rebuild with them. And so I realized that I am not the holder of knowledge, like truly. I am a facilitator because I provide tools intentionally, but I also am learning with, beside, in front of you. Like, I'm doing all that work alongside you. And so when they are learning, they truly are teaching me. And I'm very present in those moments. Like, this is what I'm learning from you. And I say we learn to be critical from each other, but not in a disrespectful way, but in a way that people can talk and people can question each other. And your job is to make sure that you come with the knowledge to support what you're saying, but also be ready to shift what you're thinking, because other people can teach you things too. So it's definitely a part of the culture that we build together.
One of the things that I've really admired about you that I want you to talk about is we're dealing right now nationwide with mandates. We all know what they are, and they limit our teaching. The research is sometimes cherry picked, so we don't know what to believe and what not to believe. How do you deal with mandates? And you and I have talked about this, and still keep your integrity, not to mention your job.
Right.
You have said, and I'm quoting you, there are legal obligations with prescribed curricula that has been purchased, but there are also moral obligations and our integrity to the profession and ourselves that are not up for grabs. So talk
Absolutely.
about how you navigate that very tricky terrain.
Absolutely. And so I'm in South Carolina. It's definitely one of the most conservative states going on right now in the country. And so we absolutely have had an overhaul in our curriculum, but that doesn't mean that the things that my beliefs that keep me coming back every day have shifted. It just means that I've got to be a lot more thoughtful, a lot more strategic about the ways that I facilitate the learning, the ways that I participate in the learning. But the pieces of me that are not up for grabs are that I'm a thinker. I'm a critical thinker. I'm a problem solver. I'm a problem poser. There is no text that takes that away from me. There's no curriculum that takes that away. And so constantly reminding myself to be present with my learners, even when I may not agree with the way that the curriculum has laid it out, that doesn't change who I am in that classroom and with my learners. We still have these identities that we hold dear, and that doesn't change because there is a book that lays out the curriculum a certain way. And one of the things that I've actually reflected on is that I've had to frame my mindset in a way that I show up positive for my kids every day. And previously I co-constructed all of my curriculum because that's how I was mentored. But most of us have lived with a curriculum. And so this one's just a little more stringent, but people have done this for forever and we've always found a way and made a way. And so that's what I'm holding on to now, is that we will continue to find a way and make a way. And part of that is that we've got to lean on each other.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed is there is this, sometimes people are putting themselves in this position of a moral high ground. Like, well, I'm going to replace this curriculum with this curriculum. But what we've got to do is really support each other. There is no moral high ground. We're here for kids. We're here for the learners. We're here to support them and help them be the best people they can be because they are shaping our future. And so it is not about what's going to make us comfortable. It's about what can we do to give them the best that we have on a day-to-day basis. That's what I've been thinking about.
And I think you have to do that in a community. So for instance,
Yes.
you're talking about, and you and I have talked about this being learner-centered,
Yes.
child-centered, not phonics-centered. And
Yes.
how do you do that when you have this mandate that you may or may not agree with? And so I know you follow the mandate. You also find time to make sure that kids are reading, that
Yes.
not.
Yes. And also, I also think too, when you have the eyes to see, you can see that there's a holistic lens to everything, right? And so even if it is spelling, there are patterns, there's holistic pieces. We're learning how to look at this lens, these vowels, so that we can recognize those words, so that we can access other material. So that we can, those patterns aren't just patterns in the isolation, they're
Right.
patterns in our lives. And so
Mhm.
we're going to read it, we're going to write it, we're going to recognize it, so then that we can use it to build more knowledge. And so, but that's in our mindset. That's us having to take the time to reframe that no prescription is going to give us the tools to have the eyes to see. And that's where that community piece comes. We've got to build ourselves, we've got to build others up, and we've got to stay connected with the people who have the same eyes to see as us, so that we realize we're not in this alone. We have people, and those other people are looking for us too. We got to do a little digging so that we can do that hard work together.
And advocate. I mean,
Yes.
I see you as a leader in advocating, because when you're working at a high poverty school where very often the expectations for kids are so low, and the only way you can fit in everything is to embed the reading and writing into the curriculum areas, right?
Mhm.
Um, and uh, and to put phonics and reading and writing all together, not as three separate things. They all support each other.
Right.
I don't know if you know this because we're have a big age difference, but this in my lifetime of teaching is the third iteration of this oversimplification of reading and cherry picking the research to make phonics more important. I think it is very important, but it needs to work together with reading and writing. So this, in my lifetime, is the third time we've been through this kind of extremism. It kind of matches the political landscape.
Right.
And so it's going to happen again. And it probably will take, like we've lost the war, but we're winning some battles now.
Right.
It's going to take advocacy from people like you um, to, get your troops together in your school and in your district and know what the research is and be
Right.
respectful as you always are and follow the mandates, but still find a way to make sure that kids are mostly reading.
That's right. And I will say independent reading time has been the most joyful, I think, for me that it's been in a long time because that time is so precious. I would call myself like the book pusher. And like today, a kid was like, Mrs. Drayton, she was like, I didn't have a good match. Can you match me with the book? And I was like, I sure can. So that has really been a special time.
How do you fit it in? People want to know that.
Oh,
Excuse me.
well, I think now more than ever, it's a fitted in. I will guarantee this time every day. And so while yes, small group times still happen and the win times, the intervention still happens, that one-on-one you and your book that you love, that is a guaranteed time because when we're not co-constructing the curriculum alongside them and feeding their interests, we have to find something that's going to motivate them. That's that independent reading time. And so just I had to take that time with them really intensely at the beginning of the year to figure out what is it that makes them tick. Let's just keep going in and out, doing those book talks, motivating them, letting them meet with other readers, getting excited. And so now we have that momentum. And it's something that I will always make time for. That's one of those pieces that's not up for grabs. There's not a negotiation in that.
What made you get to that point? Because people heard you say you were a new teacher when you had Catrice, and so to make that kind of progress with a student is unusual for a brand new teacher. How did you get so good at your classroom management? I hate the word classroom management, but at building a classroom community as a new teacher, because it's very difficult to do.
I will say I'm really different in the sense that I don't have another word for it besides I am just so holistic. Like the details to me, I am fortunate in the way that they do work themselves out because I am so intentional about what is my end goal. I'm able to see this is where we need to get. This is the type of people we need to be. This is the type of language we need to use. This is the way that we need to influence others. And then I'm able to think backwards about what are the things that I need to do to support them to get there. And so I think about, I want us to be the type of people who can support each other. What are the things that people who support each other do? And that's just the way that I've kind of worked. I have always been the type of person who, why are you putting tons of restrictions when they don't need to be there? Because when you're too confined, there's no space to grow. So there has to be growing space and space for reflection. And I will say, my mentor, who is also, she's like my family, Nisi Jefferson, she mentored me into realizing it is always about the kids.
Yeah.
And so we reflect, not at the end of the day, constantly. We are reflecting to celebrate and to identify areas that were challenges and then to grow. It is always a growth cycle.
I think what you're also saying is that you're starting with the
Yes.
big picture, and that's a
Yes.
really important thing. And I think that's really hard for new teachers because they're thinking about all the parts and lesson plans. And I remember I could never write a lesson plan beyond the first day. I had the end goal, but I had to see how this day went before I could decide what we'd be doing the next day. Talk about your greatest concern in education right now. You and I had talked a little bit about that and what you think we can do about it.
Yes. So,
Individual as you know, concerned citizens, as colleagues. Um, it, it's a big issue now. There are a lot of issues right now. But what are some of your biggest concerns right now?
my greatest concern right now is that families are not aware of their responsibility of just awareness and advocacy for their kids. I think for quite some time we turned things over to the school. Families turned over a lot to the school, everything, the rearing, everything, all the decision making. And so I think now we're at a place where families have to step back in and realize that schools have shifted and what we're giving the kids have shifted for people who don't have the awareness yet. And so if those families are not aware of those shifts, their kids are missing a lot. And so they've got to get in tune with the legislation that's out there and what that legislation looks like in real life, what it looks like in that classroom. They've got to get in there and see what's happening in the school so they realize this may not be what I want it to feel like and look like for a child who I want to be a critical thinker who's going to make decisions to change the world in positive ways, to be a contributing citizen who wants the best for everyone. That's my greatest concern.
And but the other side of the coin there is that not all kids that come to school, not all teachers value that child's language and culture, family stories. How do you deal with that? That's a very difficult thing. And that's a big part of, what's happening with book bans and the amount of control that's put on what teachers can do and even say, right?
Absolutely.
Um, so I think it's important to remember that I've been teaching over 50 years. Nobody has ever said, hey, this is a great time to be teaching. Things are so easy. Parents are great. The kids come in, they do what we say. It's always been a really difficult time to be teaching. And I think, and we're in I think, a very difficult phase right now. And we're beginning to win, I would say, some battles, and people are beginning to see, oh, well, maybe there's another way to do this where I don't have to put everything into pieces,
Mm-hmm.
where I don't have to be looking at, valuing data, um, that there's no dogma about exactly what we should be doing.
Right.
Because freedom is something that teachers need to have. We can't give it to students if we don't have it ourselves. So we
Absolutely.
need administrators and community members that really support and value teachers. Well, what's the last thing that you would like to, we're sort of to the end of our time, that you might want to leave people with?
I would say to know your why. I think that was the biggest piece of your book coming out at just the right time. When I had some really hard questions for myself, but I was able to go back to what's my why. Why do I come back to a hard situation? It's because I'm passionate about empowering children who are thinkers and capable of also making hard decisions and asking hard questions. I know your why, know why you're doing this, because if you know why you're doing this, you're willing to show up every day and to
Mhm.
continue the fight, because it is like it's hard work. We're facing a lot of challenges inside of our own buildings. So if you are in tune with why you're doing it, it makes it worth it.
And I think also, just to end on this note, that we impact more lives than we know. And there are a lot of Catrice, because she's like you. She's very outspoken. She's very
Yes.
aware of her feelings. But there are a lot of kids that we've impacted that we don't know about. And so on the tough days, we have to remember that. I think also that more than we realize, I think that we create a sanctuary for kids that don't have one, that are
Mhm.
homeless, that have a tough home situation, that
Mhm.
when they come into your classroom, you see them, you love them, you give them
Yeah.
choices, you give them meaningful work. You're not wasting their time and their brains. That's a very big thing. I will never forget a student that I worked with in um, Wisconsin, and he was in second grade. He was considered like the problem child for the whole second grade. He wasn't reading, he wasn't writing. I saw him again in fourth grade because I was doing residency work. He had the same teacher, fortunately, and she was a very good teacher, and he had a very difficult home life. And he was like a different child. And it was because the expectations were kept very high for him. He had a lot of support where he needed it. And I said to him, what changed for you? You're not the same student you were when I saw you last 2 years ago. And he said, I can't do it, went to its grave. I can do it, rised up.
I love it.
And I think, that's what you did for Catrice. And I think that's what all of the most expert teachers do for kids, that you can do this and I will help you. I often would tell kids, do the best you can. I'll help you with the rest.
That's right.
And do the best you can comes after we have shown them the way, shared the literature, done the demonstration teaching, done the shared experiences. Now go try it, put in your best efforts. I'll help you with the rest. And then I think teachers feel, I think that kids feel supported
Mhm.
or engaged. Um, well, I want to thank you for being the marvelous person that you are.
Thank
I
you.
apologize. And it's just wonderful because a lot of people are now going to know about you. And
Mhm.
when you write your book, I will be there cheering you on
Thank you, Regie.
and getting it out there. So thank you for joining us. I want to just say, for a really good article on dealing with reading mandates, it's called Coping with Reading Mandates, literacytalk.info has some really good articles and research by two really outstanding educators, Dorsey Hamill and Denise Nessel,
Mhm.
researchers and teachers and great people trying to make the work more manageable for us.
That's awesome.
So thank you. Thank you to our listeners for joining our conversation. It'll be posted on my website and on Twitter soon. And thank you also to Matt Renwick behind the scenes, ensuring the technology works well. Love you, Matt, and thank you. See you soon.